Hello, good evening. Are you all there?
Good evening.
Yeah, hello.
Good evening. Hello.
Hi. Welcome to the first episode of Rehearsing the Revolution Online, a storytelling experiment where we generate instant visionary fiction with our guests and the audience. And today's guests are great storytellers. Brian Fitzgerald, actor, director of New Dutch Connections and the Future Academies for ex-refugees, and Brian Fitzgerald, senior story hacker at Dancing Fox and former activist at Greenpeace. Welcome. And the poet of the evening is, as usual, Jürgen Unongario. Wat ga jij doen, Jürgen?
I will summarize our story by listening and giving it new dimensions in the world of poetry.
Well, that was well said. And I am Petra Ardai. I will guide you through the storytelling. So let us quickly explain what we mean by visionary fiction and why we think it's essential to play with stories and invent fantasy worlds. Well, it's important because we don't really do anything else. Humans are 24/7 storytelling machines. We can't express ourselves without thinking in stories. Moreover, all our stories are fictional stories, as they are either based on memories, on interpretations of what has happened in the past, or they are forecasts of the future, of imaginative realities that have not yet happened. So we continuously identify with these actually fictitious stories in us and around us. And we allow stories to separate us from each other, from other life forms, from nature. We create categories, borders, in the hope to understand the world, but instead of that, we get entangled in narratives of us and them, and lose the plot. So visionary storytelling decolonizes the imagination. It creates an imaginary safe space for a cultural shift that regenerates the feeling of connectedness, cultivates awareness on how our assumptions and preconditioning withhold us from change. If we can't break through the spell in reality, we should try to break free through fiction. At least that's what we thought. So, Brian and Bright, what is the role of storytelling in your work? Can you give a short introduction to that?
Okay, when I work with, as New Dutch Connections, we do two things. On one side, we organize programs with refugees and refugees of different categories, those who are waiting for decision from the government if they could stay in the country or not, those who have already been told from the government to leave the country and sometimes they cannot leave or they don't want to leave. But we also work with people who have a resident permit. But all these categories of people, they are in different kind of narratives. And most time the narrative is imposed by the government of the host country where they are. And sometimes it's not the same story. It's not the world they imagined when they came here that they came into. And so, but you know, in every story, there are different characters playing in it. So one of my challenges when I'm working with refugees and with those out of undocumented migrants is to see if they can meet people who want to play a role in making their life story a success. Because now most time they are surrounded with people who, you know, with different kind of people are surrounding them, playing different roles in their life. And so one of the work I do is to challenge refugees and migrants to surround themselves with the right people who can help them to achieve their dreams. And on the other side, I also try to challenge others because I work a lot with companies as well. So on one side, in New Dutch Connections, we do that. And on the other side, we make theater productions as well. And we stay on stages, but that's quite different because sometimes theater productions is different from getting people really engaged. So in my job, I'm looking for people who want to be a part of the story of the other. and sometimes by engaging with them for a very long time.
Right. So in that sense, the ownership of the story is really important. I mean, the life of people with a refugee background, it's extremely important, no? That they become, again, owner of their own story.
Yeah, and they start attracting the right people to play a part in their story, because, you know, in every story you have the protagonist, you have the antagonist, you have the people helping the hero to achieve their dreams, you have the valiant. So there are different roles, but people are playing different roles. And so, and the moment people start understanding the environment, because I also work with people in transition. So people making transitions sometimes from a very informal society to a very formal society. So if I want to bring about change, if I'm not happy with some things in Liberia, I don't write a letter to the government because nobody will reply me. So I just go there to the office and I make some noise and stuff like that, and I get the things changed. So I create some theater with, but in Holland, I have to write a very good letter, and sometimes I take them to the court, and that's the way I get things, that's the way things changes.
Right.
So once, you know, sometimes so in my work, there's a lot of narrative. So sometimes I ask a friend of mine from Yemen, if you drive very hard on the car. So, and he said, oh, when I'm in Yemen, I tell the police, send the bill to me. The police said, no, because there's no address he's going to send the bill to. So I always like, so in my work, there's a lot of storytelling, because with storytelling, we get to understand each other a little bit more than we do without the context of stories.
Right. Thank you. Brian.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Like Bright, story is at the center of everything we do at Dancing Fox. We're a creative agency that helps nonprofits and charities, activists and artists who are looking to create a more beautiful world, to tell better stories, and to work with something that we call story as theory of change. And that's an idea that says that, you know, all of our behavior, individual and collective, is actually shaped by this sea of invisible stories that we're all swimming in constantly, that define what's right, normal, and possible for us. And that really the history of activism and social change is changing those narratives that underlie those behaviors and making things that once seemed impossible or wrong or weird suddenly common sense and normal and right and possible. And that, you know, helping people who are looking to make change in the world to navigate those stories, spot those stories, and figure out how to change them is what we do. And we like to encourage them to you know, go deep in that belief that if you can change a story, you can change the world.
Right. It's very often that people think that they can't change the story, right? Who am I? Yeah. So this empowerment is very important, I think.
Yeah. It's one of those stories that we swim through every day. Advertising throws it at us constantly. Politicians throw it at us constantly, is that you're too small to make a difference. Your story really, really doesn't amount to much in the world. And that's an incredibly disempowering story to tell. And that's an incredibly, disconnecting story to make, and very intentional in some cases.
Yeah, and it's very dominant as well, right? Yeah. So we keep it now short, but naturally people are very interested in your work, but they will find out all the information about you and your work on our website and everywhere, of course, on your own websites and everywhere. So let's start, because we have some work to do. Let's imagine a fantasy world. I will give you some coordinates first. Any resemblance with reality is a coincidence. It can be on another planet, in another dimension, or in the future. It's up to you. In this world, 2% of the inhabitants, they can be humans, animals, plants, robots, any kind of creature, sentient beings or entities with an intelligent consciousness. It's up to you. But this 2% of the inhabitants is on the verge of extinction. They are endangered species. We don't know why these species are not fit for the times. What we do know about them is that they determine the prevailing dominant narrative of this world. They do that in order to conserve their power and remain the rulers of this world. The 2% keeps the 98% with very tricky methods of manipulation under the thumb. What is this dominant narrative? How did it become so powerful? The 98% of the inhabitants is a diverse group of humans, animals, plants, robots, any kind of creatures, sentient beings, or entities with an intelligent consciousness. The 98% conforms to the dominant narrative. They don't know better. They feel that they are not allowed to question it at all. The 98% have lost the ownership of the story, and they need to find a way to regain it. Well, this is the setup. And before we start to build this world, let's also involve a little bit the audience.
Yes, the audience. Please open up your ears, turn up your volume a little bit, and listen to this story. Share in the comments your associations, your thoughts, your feelings, short descriptions of how the fantasy world looks and feels to you. Describe the scenery, give it colors, give it taste, give it smell. Rhythm, even if you have a sound or something you want to hum. As we go along, we will incorporate your messages into this story.
Right. So the idea is that the audience will give us in the chat some imagery or description of the scenery, and we dive into the, let's say, physical, social, political setting of this world. So are you ready, Bright and Brian? Who lives in this world, and who is this 2% who is and who is the diverse group of 98%? Let's negotiate.
It sounds like an absolutely strange and incomprehensible world where 2% of the people would be not looking after their interests or able to ignore extinction. I would imagine that 98% must have some incredibly powerful distractions to keep people from paying attention to an extinction event or their own welfare. I can only imagine that there's got to be some way of sealing these creatures off and disconnecting them from their connections to each other, their connections to their ancestors and their past, and their connections to their future descendants. Because otherwise it wouldn't seem, it seems like an impossible suppression of empathy to be able to create such a thing. I don't know, Bright, what do you think? How would this possibly have come to be?
Bright, you have to turn on your microphone.
Yes. I think for me, something about stories that it always brings about association, and that you start to look at the story from your own point of view and from your own personal autobiography. Sometimes it happens. And in my case, listening to the story, I have to think about Mahatma Gandhi. That's just the first image that came to me, this guy who stood up and said, well, I think it's, and just came to a certain conclusion and said, I would like to die for this revolution, but I'm not prepared to kill for this revolution. And, just is that word was the beginning of something very great, because at the end of the day, Martin Luther King copied some part of Gandhi's movement. So Martin Luther King also decided to say, okay. And so, and Gandhi himself was partly also inspired by, himself said he was partly inspired by some words of Jesus or the movement of Jesus, just looking at some people try to make changes in the world, not just, trying to change who try to change not only the narrative, but the way people interact with the minority that was the order of the day. Mm-hmm. And so like in the case of Gandhi, which was the minority, and in the case of Martin Luther King, who actually brought, well, if you say, so it's just coming, just kind of images come to me, like Rosa Parks, who would say, I'm not getting behind the boss. And all of a sudden we all get confused. And at the end of the day, these people helped to shape our reality today. Because if these steps were not taken, I don't know where the Western civilization would be if Rosa Parks have not said, "I'm not going behind the box." You know, I don't know what kind of society we'll be living in today.
Right. So that's coming a bit later because we are still setting.
It's okay. It's just for me. The association comes up when you're listening to a story.
The association comes whenever it comes, and this is the direction we go. But we have to find our Rosa Parks and Martin Luther Kings and Gandhis in this story yet, because we need to understand how is it possible that 2% of the inhabitants actually suppresses 98%, or that and into a kind of narrative. I mean, there are very, very similar things in real life, but of course it's not on purpose. How is it possible? What kind of methods do they use to keep the 98% calm and obedient?
You would certainly have to make heroic acts like, well, examples like Martin Luther King or Indira Gandhi or Rosa Parks, make that kind of heroism seem like it requires superpowers, that it's beyond the ability of any individual. It can't possibly be you little creature there. It can't possibly be something that you can do. It's only these magically gifted people. And so separate people from that possibility of heroism, I think, would be an absolutely essential piece of the puzzle that the 98% would have to put in place to keep these creatures, confined and docile and not making trouble.
Yeah, that's what you also said in the beginning, that if they are cut off from their history, from their ancestors, then they don't have any hope or relevance to change the story, right?
Yeah.
Or something like that, right?
And you'd want to cut them off from nature as well, because if you're worried about extinction, if you're worried about nature, then what you have to ensure is that you're creating a barrier between individuals and that nature. You can't let them appreciate it, love it.
Right. So that means that this 2% is actually a homogenic group, probably, and they are very afraid of losing power. They are in the absolute minority, and they have tricks to cut people from nature, to separate them from their past. Yeah, quite a dystopia. Right.
Yeah, well, I think it's sometimes, maybe, I think it's, I really don't understand. It's difficult to understand anyway. So I think when people are in that, when people are in that situation, maybe, I don't know, it's difficult to imagine.
But what I don't understand is, if the 2%, why don't they work together with the 98%? I mean, well, we need to make it up.
Perhaps they've just recently evolved from a competitive tribal sort of model of civilization into a more cooperative form of civilization, and yet that tribalism still holds. The red ones think they're better than the green ones, and the green ones think that only pay attention to green deaths when there's an accident. There's still that sense of tribal competition, and that 2% is essentially nervous and scared. And in the chat, there's this comment that the 98% is individual focused, that there's a forgetting of a common story, of a universal story, and that the 2% have crafted a story where they are special or destined or different in a way that separates them. Again, disconnection separates them from everyone else. It makes their story different. without seeing the universality of the story of the species.
But okay, I think maybe also the 98% don't want to play the same game as the 2%. Maybe I
like that.
Do you think that they are aware that there is a possibility to change? Are they suffering from the dominant narrative, or are
I think the 98% is suffering from it, but I think somehow the 98% is still trying to figure out how do we free ourselves from the bondage of the 2% that we're not happy with it. But it's not that they want to, they're not looking for the extinction of the 2%, but maybe they're just trying to see, can there be some form of, is there some way, they just feel that the 2% is so disconnected from, from everything, from love, and they don't really know how to interact with the 2% anymore.
Right. So they don't know how to tell them, we don't want anything bad. We just, maybe they don't even know that do they know that they can change the narrative? How do they, well, maybe they have to realize it step by step, right? Because let's say the 2% is really powerful at this moment, right? So how could this happen? What is the background of this word, the history of this word? What are the assumptions we can make for this society? Like, how did it happen that this 2% became, we understand why they do want to keep the power and why they want to hold the dominant narrative, because they are afraid, right? But how did they become so powerful?
But I think the fact is, I don't really know if they are very powerful. I think they are powerful, but I don't really know if they are very, very powerful the way they think they are.
But they have a good story that makes people think that they are really powerful.
Well, for those who believe in their stories, okay.
Well,
but
that's 98%.
I don't know if the 98% really believe the story, but I think the 98% just tolerate them.
Right. All right. That's a little bit like in Eastern Europe was before the changes, right? That we all knew that the dominant narrative is not our narrative, but then we lived in two narratives at the same time.
Yes. So there's two narratives living at the same time, and sometimes people ask themselves the questions, like you saw in Eastern Europe: is it what dying for the revolution, or do we look for another way to? So people just start to live with it. Not that they really accept it, but they live with it. But somewhere deep within them, they know this is not right.
Yeah, and how can we see that somewhere deep in them? Does this have a kind of expression?
I mean, I think you sometimes you see some of this, you see some of the joy that happens when sometimes you see the joy when people feel there is, at last they can have some form of freedom, and then you know that there's been a big longing from within. But somehow they just kind of, so that's why sometimes, sometimes I feel that's why it's about the silence of the majority.
Right.
So it's what do you do against the silence of the majority, or just that the majority is just busy with their everyday life, and they may not be happy, but they're just busy with their everyday life. And that's where the change maker becomes very dangerous, because the change maker brings up a consciousness. It stirs up something within people, and then people don't want to accept it anymore, accept the reality that was given to them.
Yeah. The change maker who challenges the idea that this is normal, because that would be a powerful, powerful tool for the 2%, is just little by little change the definition of what's normal and convince enough people. They don't even have to change their minds. They can still believe that other narrative. Yeah. But if you convince them that people around them believe that that's normal and acceptable, then they will more likely conform to it. And just seeing in the chat, there's some lovely ideas here of the idea that tranquility is a luxury commodity in this world, and the act of silence, of non-distraction, is only for the few. And maybe that was a source of wealth, that tranquility and peace, something that the 2% were able to get a monopoly on or have more of than anyone else. And as a result, they were able, they become afraid of change because they don't want to lose it, that advantage.
Right. Shall we look at the what people said? We can look. I see a really nice comment that many really nice comments, but there are giant carnivorous plants everywhere. That's a visual image.
I also see here that suffocating, can't breathe easily. That's one of the
first remarks, right? Yeah.
Exactly. That's what the world looks like.
Yeah.
So there's a 2% with peace and tranquility, and a 98% that are suffocating and surrounded by carnivorous plants.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. While you were talking about the silence of the majority, then I thought maybe that the change could come, that there is a kind of noise in that silence, or a kind of resonance that would be maybe a nice magical start for a change. Shall we go towards that, like towards a change? Because we have a conflict, we have a world with carnivorous plants and suppression and quite a lot of suffering. But I think we still need to deepen the conflict to create more action. Otherwise, our story is extremely, I mean, it's a bit boring then. So in visionary fiction, change comes always from bottom up and decentralized and collective, and it focuses on building new just words. So who seeks change in this world, and who seeks to prevent that change, you think? Well, it's quite obvious, but let's
Sure. You've got a 2% that want to maintain business as usual, the status quo, need to keep everything the way it is because they have what they need and they expect that their descendants will have what they need. And more important than anything is just to continue this fiction that this is the way things have always been and will always be, and that change is impossible. Because if you can convince the 98% that change is impossible, then it's easy to look at other things, to be distracted, to go into the rituals of this world with carnivorous plants and competitions that are reinforcing green versus red, tribal tribal conflicts and tribal warfare that's emphasized and reinforced with all kinds of entertainment and distractions that keep people's mind off the fact that they are in this incredibly noisy, dangerous place with carnivorous plants where extinction is happening for some and suffering is happening for others. And there's noise, 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 and there is no tranquility whatsoever. And surely at some point, this has to wear on the 98%. And some within the 98% must start to feel that this is somehow, some way, not right.
So is it not invading their body, Bright? I mean, if you are in this world that you're actually maybe invisibly, but you are continuously bombarded with this strong tension and all over these dangerous plants and suppression and suffocation, then probably your body is very much invaded, no? I think so. Well, maybe you had another idea, but I was imagining that if you are continuously in this, then you start to change, right? Maybe they get more bigger and bigger ears to hear the noise that is actually where the change is happening, maybe, or I don't know. It was just thinking.
I think one of the big challenges is I think if there is no, I think one of the big challenges is the interaction between the 98% and the 2%. So if the 2% starts getting deeper into the world and becoming a part of the 98%, then it becomes very, then other narrative starts to happen. So most times the 2% everybody wants to be like that. They want everybody to strive to become like the 2%. So and because that is the standard, so everybody should want to be like the 2%. So the 2% feels they don't need to be part of the 98% because everybody should be like the 2%. So, and I think if some part of the 2% start getting into the arena of the 98%, and they really start to see that there's something wrong with just having this 2%, maybe a few changes will start to happen. Because I think the legitimacy of the 2% is to make sure that there's just that the only people who become part of the 2% have the same mindset. So that's the legitimacy.
Are these people we are talking about?
I don't know if it is really people. It's just people. I think it's also a system. It's also a behavior. It's also a way of life. And I think so. It's really building this very big distance and this very big war between the 98% and the 2%, and making the 2% the standard.
Maybe the new generation of this entity of the 2%, that they are maybe more open for change, or you don't know. We don't know. So what role does
I think because the 2% somehow they are very happy with how they are. I think they feel they are happy because they have created a standard.
Right. But
and everyone should become like them. So everyone should be dreaming. When a child is born, their dream, their objective in life should be to become the 2%. Right.
Yeah. But then, in a way, it's also very sad because they are on the verge of extinction. So it's a kind of they are not fit for the time, and so they are disappearing. So they try to hold themselves big, but they are quite afraid, actually, I think, because they feel that something is not matching between them and the time they are living it. So I mean, it's very difficult also to keep up appearances. I mean, they are only 2% anyway.
As long as the 98%, as long as they have a lot of people from the 98% who want to be like the 2%, then they feel they have a reason to be in control.
So they need to find out that they are in their diversity more beautiful, the 98% somehow.
I think when the 98% start to see themselves differently, then there's a big change.
Yes. So what role does the natural world play in the conflict, you think, or in this change seeking? Could the natural world play a role in it?
Well,
yeah, go ahead, Brian.
You have these carnivorous plants, and in the chat we have the suggestion that the carnivorous plants start eating the 98% and no one notices. I would even take it a step further and say, perhaps when someone is eaten by the carnivorous plants, it creates a little bit of a tranquility substance that is very precious and people love it. And so they're somehow okay with the fact that a few people are being eaten by the carnivorous plants because it's bringing something that the 2% have that everybody wants to have, and they crave being like that 2%. And that tranquility substance that the carnivorous plants produce is, so seductive that they are willing to accept this extinction going on and people disappearing every now and then because there's something that in the short term is very, very desirable that's coming out of it.
I see somebody suggesting that the 98% are giant insects.
Maybe iridescent beetles with bright psychedelic colored wings.
And they are a very diverse group, we know that. So it's possible. I also see another comment about architecture. Architecture is very important in this world. Well, I don't know what we can incorporate, but we can try to incorporate.
I would imagine the architecture would look like the carnivorous plants. It would be very iconic to them because they're something that is clearly important in their society. It's both a threat and a benefit. And there would be, yes, cathedrals and public buildings would be following the shapes of these pod-like plants.
Oh, there is a comment. I hear a Dutch song. Proost op de verliezers, want wij zijn met meer. That means for our maybe non-Dutch speaking guests, proost to the losers or those who lose, because we are with more, right? Was the right good? Yeah. Oh. Cheers to the losers. Yeah, exactly. Right. Whoa. So how does the need for change become clear? So like, can we imagine a fiction? We are making visionary fiction. We are making up a story. So how could this, what would be the moment that it becomes clear for the 98%? Wow, I hear it. Now it's time to change. And how, yeah, what would be the sign?
Maybe it's a very, very young member of the 98% whose movement starts to change, shoulders up, heads up high, slowly growing longer and longer over generations of time, and speaking up and just saying, something's wrong here, something's wrong here, something's wrong here, and inviting others to be a part of a way of thinking differently. And it's so unusual and so attractive. This is a beetle singing a song that has never been sung before. It's a beetle beating its wings in a way that has never been, a dance that has never been done before. And people are fascinated by it. But through it all, there's this message that there's something wrong here. We need to do something. There's something wrong here. We need to do something. There's something wrong here. We need to do something.
Right, you have to follow up, please.
Well, I think the change will start to come when the 98% really start to feel, and really start connecting again with themselves, and realizing they don't need to be part of the 2%. They can just, they are part of the 98%, and if they can start looking to themselves again and getting connected with their ancestors and with their beauty, with their past, and I think they would start seeing things differently. And then change would start taking place without they forgetting the time they were being under the bondage of the 2%.
Yeah.
And without trying to becoming the 2%, but going back to being what it means to be 98%, because that's hopeful.
I love that, and it rhymes and resonates so lovely, so well with what Thad is suggesting in the chat, that one day a child is born that resembles both the 2% and a 98%, but is a member of neither, and is able to do exactly what you just talked about, Bright. Open up the understanding and the eyes of one to the other and the other to the other.
Yeah.
And to realize that, yeah, they have a common story. They don't have a different story. If their story is to continue, they have to have the same story. They have to, yeah, lose this idea that the 2% have a different story than everyone else.
Yeah.
The vibrating of this new being holds a different frequency and is therefore felt in another part of the body. Very bodily, embodied sense of change coming from the chat there.
Yeah, I guess because it was about feeling. It was about that the change starts when the 98% truly connects with themselves. That was the key point of the change, and that cannot be dissociated from the body. Cannot be. I mean, you have to. I mean, or whatever body. You know, I mean, a feeling is a feeling.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm a bit stuck with this idea, what Bright said about that. How can we take care of that they remember the legacy so that they don't forget what happened and they don't become kind of new 2%, right? So
Yeah.
that how can you, yeah, how can you really have a shared narrative and then, yeah, not have the ambition to rule this world again, or fight with historical amnesia. There are so many. Well, of course, we are making fiction now, so we stay in fiction.
You wrap that lesson in a powerful story and make sure that it gets told again and again and again and again.
Right. So that would be really good to have some ideas how we can take care of that. It's that you can move on, but it's not forgotten. And that you
because
know
actually the 98% don't want the 2% to get into extinction as well.
Yeah.
I see. So we were actually planning around this moment to ask, to look at the audience remarks, but actually we more or less looked at it. So guys, keep up the good work there, and thank you for all your remarks there. We work very hard to incorporate them, and they're lovely. Thank you. So shall I then go towards the next step of the story? So imagine, Brian and Bright, that you are a character in this story, that you will be exploring this world you created through the eyes of a character that you make up now. So like you have a name, an age, a religion, an ability, a gender. You can be anything. You can be any kind of sentient being or intelligence or a singular or a multiple entity. That would be great to have you as a fictional character in this story. Now you have all the chance to be anything you want. So, and of course you will be a key figure of the change. I mean, not you, but your character.
Or there's another character that is the key figure of the change. And I'm imagining my character is one of these beetles. And it's one of the 98% that is less colorful, not as vibrant as some others, but has been noticing this strange dance that this other beetle has been doing and saying, something's wrong, something has to change, something's wrong, something has to change. And feeling that resonate in my heart and sing to me in a way that none of the other stories that the 2% have been telling, and that dream of getting tranquility or having more of the soporific that comes from the carnivorous plants, just doesn't speak to me like this promise of change, this idea of this dance that this beetle is doing that says that I'm different and I'm able to express my difference and I'm able to speak my truth in a way that suggests that I can too. And I see that and I'm attracted to it and I want to be a part of it. And it pulls me into a circle of a new way of thinking. And in that new way of thinking, suddenly the world looks completely different. And what seemed normal before no longer seems normal. What was right before no longer seems right. And what seemed impossible suddenly feels possible. And it's all because this incredible dance that is just so powerful and inviting and generous and empathetic, and as Bright says, is not out to create the extinction of the 2%, but sees a larger story in which the 2% and the 98% together have to overcome these extinctions and this trauma and get to a point where this tranquility that the 2% are holding so close is there for everyone and distributed in a way that all can have it. And yeah, I am drawn to that song like a moth to the flame.
Do you also have an image of the beetle?
I'm an iridescent blue beetle. I don't know why it's blue, but it has to be blue. It's definitely a blue beetle. It's got those stag sort of antenna coming out the front. It's a 12-legged beetle, just to make it less terrestrial.
Right. You have the great background for it, by the way. But Bright, who are you? Who would you be in this story? Like, what kind of character would you imagine for yourself?
Well, I think the first imagination that came to me is that of a father who is part of the 2% and part of the 98%, who is a father of somehow of the 2% and somehow partly of the 98%, and who really feels, how come this came from me? And what can I do to, because I was happy having, before we were all 100%. So what happened? You know, I would somehow go into reflection with myself and try to go to reflection with some part of the 2% and 98%, try to see how do we work things out, because this is going nowhere. If we continue like that, at the end of the day, it's going to be a lot of pain, a lot of destruction, and this is not, there should be a way. You know, I try to just want to, I first acknowledge that this is, I've done a lot wrong, you know, my way. And I think going to this dialogue might be, I don't know, better just you know, taking my part of the responsibility.
But that's beautiful. Can you tell a bit more? How would you do that? Like how do you imagine? Keep it fiction. Keep it in fiction.
Yes, yes.
Take your time.
I think it is for me recognizing that the 2% is in me and the 98% is in me. Both are in me. And so I know that I'm very powerful, both in the 2% and in the 98%, very, very powerful. And so, and also knowing that, yeah, that what connects both powers is love. And when I lose that, then it's gone.
Yeah, so I actually wanted to ask what's your relationship to the conflict, but that's completely clear now. And then I wanted to ask what do you need to overcome the obstacles to make a change, but you just also answered my question without didn't have to state it, right? Great. We have a very strange remark there. Brian equals Ringo.
John was actually always my beetle, but
Right. Could we make up a fantasy about what's your relationship to each other in this story, like the beetle and the father?
I think the father is in the beetle and the beetle is in the father, you know.
Wow, that's a big Drost effect. It's like it's going into each other's. Okay.
yeah.
Right.
Well, it's just first thought for me.
Absolutely, but it's all, again, you know, all part of this. Their story is the same. They're united in the story of their species, and
Yes.
that, yeah, realizing that and living that is the most important thing to bring about their survival. And I love the the narrative that's going on in the chat of the, you know, this vibrating song of the beetle is you know, holds a different frequency and is therefore felt in another part of the body, and that adds, and the hexagonal walls of the high beetles vibrated and fell as a result. And with the fall of the hexagonal walls, the mingling of the 2% and the 98% became complete, and somehow this recognition of the universal story of their being characters in each other's stories and heroes of each other's stories became the thing that healed the rift.
Well, I see there. Funny what Bright said. I felt a dolphin, love and empathy. Oh wow, love.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah. Click, click. Mm.
There is a little timer going off right here
Right.
about how much time we have left.
We have 8 minutes left, and I think we are organically going towards a kind of end of the story, and that you can summarize it. But I thought we have we get an invention of new language in the chat, like the Beatles are talking to each other, and this dance is actually arising in sounds, I think. But are you more or less content with how we got to with the story, or do you have something to add, Brian and Bright?
Well, I'm very happy that the father can transform into the beetle. And sometimes the beetle can transform again into the father or into other creatures. I think that's what makes it very, very, I think this power of transformation into different species is maybe the hope.
Yeah, and I think that's at the heart of story as well, is that ability to put yourself into the shoes of another character and see the world through that character and that character's values. That's, yeah, essential to the art of listening and storytelling. Yeah, essential to the story of life.
Right. Thank you. I close it now. This is how far we go with the story today. And before Jürgen wraps it up, I would like to thank you both very, very much for your generous contribution and that you came along with me and with us in this experiment. And dear audience, thank you very much for your contribution. And the plot is in your hands. So please finish the story, write to us, send images, films, what happens to the characters. Do they manage to create a true revolution, or well, there were already some hints, so we are very, very curious how you can finish it and follow up. Thank you both very much, and I give the word then to Jürgen.
The word, the question, the team, the mind. Who will organize programs for the different characters, for the different roles? Who will accept the challenge to engage, to achieve the understanding, to make change to the narrative? Click, click, tss, tss, click, click, tss, tss. click, click. Tss, tss. What life form is at the center of the invisible beauty of the collective? What life form can navigate your imagination, guide your story to the surface of reality? There must be an incredibly powerful distraction that makes people not see the people who try to change the world. Where would Western society be without the heroes that form everyday life? How can the majority be left so uninspired, suppressed into believing their own story is possible? The dominant majority don't want to play, don't want to play. The dominant minority don't want to play. Love only exists for the disconnect. Love only exists for the silence of the majority. Love only exists for the conformist. The change maker is amongst you, amongst those who want to maintain the impossibility of change, cherishing the wish to be the minority, to have the same mindset, to divide and oppress, to divide and oppress, to divide and oppress. How could they have patented what it means to be happy? How could they sell us heaven and we have to buy their dreams? Tisk, tisk, click, click, tisk, tisk, click, click. The youngest will notice that change is about feeling the common story. Everyone has a space in this hexagon. The resonance is present in all, in iridescent, in the 12 legs, in the one who sees themselves as the beetle and the father. Tisk, tisk, click, click, tisk, tisk, click, click.
Amazing. Amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know if we are still on air. But this was it, guys. If you are still hearing us, thank you very much.
Thank you. And yeah, thank you, Jürgen. That was amazing.
Thank you
Absolutely
very much.
amazing.
Thank you all. Thank you all.
Yeah, I asked if we are still on air, right? No, it's streaming is stopped. Okay, great. Oh, thank you guys very much.
Hi.
I didn't know when the end we need to figure out really.